Hey everybody, Srini Rao here, founder of NotionEssentials.com, and today what I want to talk about is how you manage projects in Notion. This is a question that I've seen come up over and over again, and so I thought I would do a tutorial and talk a little bit about how I organize projects in Notion and what I've found to be one of the most effective ways. So if you remember the video that I did on setting up your workspace, I talked quite a bit about the importance of organization, and projects actually follow that rule too. But the first thing you have to know when it comes to a project is what is the goal or outcome? Are you trying to finish writing a book? Are you trying to start a podcast? Are you trying to launch a YouTube channel, kind of like I am? And so without a sort of clear outcome in mind, it's very difficult to figure out what this project should look like or how to structure it or manage it. So you want to know where what finished actually looks like. So in the case of a YouTube channel, for example, or in the case of a book, finish could be finish writing all of the chapters and submit it for publication or something like that. And that actually tends to be often where people get into trouble, is that they have really sort of vague scopes for their projects with no timeline and no clear outcome. And so what organizing your projects does is it allows you to have a clear outcome and clear out timeline, as well as continually move that project forward. So I want to talk about two different ways to organize your projects. But before we actually talk about the two ways, I think what you really need to understand when it comes to managing projects in Notion is just how important organization is. Scott Belsky's book, Making Ideas Happen, is probably one of the best books I've ever found to help you manage and execute projects. I've used the ideas in it to finish dozens of projects. In fact, the templates and the ways of organizing that I'm going to show you here actually come from Scott's book. I'll include a link to Scott's book in the description below. But you see here that he says creativity times organization equals impact. Now, if you don't organize it, you might have the most creative ideas in the world, but it'll just be a giant jumbled up mess that doesn't lead anywhere. So I want to show you two methods. The first is a really simple one that basically you could start on any page in Notion. And this is great for something really small, like a short-term project, like a trip to the grocery store. Maybe you're planning a road trip. Maybe you need to upload a video to YouTube in this case. So you'll see here that we're getting kind of meta. I'm using this actual task and I've turned it into a project where, outlining the talking points, which I've done. I'm recording the video in Loom right now. After I get done, I'll write up a YouTube description and create graphics. So this is really good for something that might take a day, might take 2 days, but eventually, the more complex a project gets, obviously you don't want to basically just run an entire project on to-do list, because it's going to be really hard to figure out what the status is, figure out where things are at, especially if you start to collaborate. So the other method that I think is actually probably the most powerful method imaginable for managing projects is called the action method, and it actually comes from Scott Belsky's book. So what I've done is I've actually taken a template that I've created here that was based on Scott Belsky's book, and you'll see here that we basically have a structure for how every project is structured. There are action steps, and as Scott says, basically the actual outcome of any project is dependent on action steps. And so this is actually a place where you want to capture the things that actually have to get done to move an idea forward. So for example, if our project is write a book, it could be write the first paragraph of the book or / introduction. And we can give it a deadline. And let's say you're collaborating on that book with somebody who can actually assign it to somebody else. We'll talk a little bit more about collaboration in another video, but you can see here that you can actually share a project with anyone, and anyone that you share that with, you'll be able to assign. And so, right now we can say our status is not started, and maybe my goal is to have this done by Monday of next week. So the idea here is really to make sure it's actionable, and as you'll see here, he says, verbs pull us into action, so definitely make sure that you use some sort of action verb for every one of your action steps. Again, this is really good for managing much more complex projects. Now, the other thing that we have is reference materials. Throughout any project, you're going to basically come across notes, you're going to come across discussions, you might come across books that you want to reference, as you'll see. And so here we can actually store links, we can store stuff that maybe isn't actionable immediately, but you want to refer back to. And then you have basically what are called back burner items, which you really can't do anything with them now. They might be useful later down the road. And I think it's really important that you keep some sort of back burner item library or something, because we all have stuff that we come across. We're like, I'm probably never going to use that, but you might be able to use it down the road. So that way it actually doesn't get in the way of what you're trying to do. Now, as you can see here, when you get a complex project, this is actually a much better way of organizing things than a to-do list, because of the fact that you'll have a status, you'll have due dates, because a simple to-do list is fantastic if we're talking about a sort of one-day thing, or something as simple as organizing this video. And the problem is, it's when we get to something more complicated, that's when it gets really messy. So for example, you can see here that I actually have an editorial calendar for this project, Notion Essentials. But the thing is that we can't necessarily get away with a to-do list like this if, for example, you're running a podcast that is on an ongoing basis, or you have a YouTube channel where you're uploading videos all the time. And so I tend to think of these to-do lists for really short, simple projects, and then I think the action method really is the best way to do this. And the great thing is that this is actually really easy to create. So let me show you how you create this really quick. So you'll see here that we have the action steps. The action steps are nothing more than just a simple table, and anybody can create that within Notion. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create your own, so we could just do a page, we could give it a table, and basically we can call that table action steps. And so basically you just replicate the whole thing, and I'm just not going to do that, but what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this as well. And here's the cool thing, is that let's say that we put all this together and we decide that, we keep using this same thing all over and over again. Well, the nice thing is that we can actually create a template, and I actually use this so much that I actually created a template for it. I'll do another video where I explain templates, but let's say that you want to put this all into a template. The nice thing is that Notion has a template button, and we can call this our projects. So one thing that I do is actually put a page in here, so that way you don't end up having this like jumbled up mess. It just gives you the page, and we call this page project name. And then we're going to go back to our Notion Essentials project management page here. And what we're going to do is, instead of add new to do, we're going to configure this template to be called new projects. And then what we're going to do is we're going to actually take all of the things that we created here, and we're going to move them into this new project page. So that way, every time you have a new project, it's just going to create a page for that project. And basically what you'll be able to do is, with the push of a button, we now have a page for a new project. It's very similar to the one that I just showed you. And there we go. So give it just a second, and there it is. So you can just recreate this over and over for every single project. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And if you want a free workspace audit to customize your workspace according to however you're working, visit notionessentials.com and sign up for a free workspace audit.